In an age where the unknown corners of the world sparked wonder and awe, one man's journey transcended the bounds of reality and imagination. His travels to the Far East opened a portal to a world brimming with wonders, where the lines between legend and truth were intriguingly intertwined. Join us as we unravel the tales of serpents lurking in deep waters, majestic beasts roaming unknown lands, and cities filled with marvels beyond comprehension. Among explorers who have historically described mythological animals, Marco Polo stands out as one of the most notable. His travel accounts, as recorded in The Travels of Marco Polo, are filled with descriptions of both real and mythical creatures, reflecting the blend of factual observation and folklore prevalent in the 1200s. Here's a look at some of the mythical animals and phenomena he described. Roc, giant bird. Marco Polo described encountering the roc, a gigantic bird from Middle Eastern mythology, capable of carrying off elephants in its talons. This tale likely originated from the discovery of large bird fossils, or the sight of exceptionally large birds, such as condors or ostriches. This is what he described in his notebook. It was for all the world like an eagle, but one indeed of enormous size, so big in fact that its quills were 12 paces long and thick in proportion, and it is so strong that it will seize an elephant in its talons and carry him high into the air and drop him so that he is smashed to pieces. Having so killed him, the bird swoops down on him and eats him at leisure. Polo claimed that the roc flew to Madagascar from the southern regions, and that the Great Khan sent messengers to the island who returned with a feather. He explicitly distinguishes the bird from a griffin. Unicorns, rhinoceros. Polo described creatures that modern readers interpret as rhinoceroses, but referred to them as unicorns. His unicorns were unlike the graceful horse-like creatures of European myth. Instead, he depicted them as ugly, brute, and with hair like a buffalo. Dog-headed tribes, Cynocephali. He wrote about tribes of dog-headed people, known as Cynocephali, a common mythological figure in medieval lore, which likely stemmed from misinterpretations or exaggerated descriptions of unfamiliar foreign peoples. Marco Polo placed the Cynocephali in the Andaman Islands, located in the Bay of Bengal. He suggested that these islands were inhabited by various strange creatures, including the dog-headed people. The Cynocephali were described as having heads similar to those of large dogs. They had canine-like features, including sharp teeth, and were believed to be covered in fur. He noted that these creatures had their own form of communication, which sounded more like barking than human speech. This lack of a comprehensible language added to their perceived ferocity and strangeness. Polo's account suggested that while these creatures were fearsome to look at, they did interact with traders. They were part of the trade networks, exchanging goods with merchants who dared to venture into their territories. Such cynocephalics are known in mythology and legend from many parts of the world, including ancient Egypt, India, Greece, and China. They were also described by Ibn Battuta as he described dog-mouthed people, and even Christopher Columbus mentioned the dog-headed tribes. The Greeks and Romans called a species of apes Cynocephalus. These apes are suspected to be baboons, serpents, and dragons. His travels in Asia included descriptions of large serpents and dragons. These were probably encounters with large snakes or embellished descriptions based on local folklore. The serpents, as described by Polo, had thick bodies and were covered with scales that were as hard as iron. He noted their stark green color, which allowed them to blend into their lush environments. Their eyes were said to glow red, adding a fearsome aspect to their appearance. These serpents were portrayed as dangerous and aggressive, capable of devouring animals and even humans. Marco Polo described how they could ambush their prey with remarkable speed despite their size. In addition to serpents, Polo also described dragons in China. These dragons, according to his accounts, were awe-inspiring creatures, revered in Chinese culture. He depicted them as large and serpent-like, with 4 legs and a capability to emit clouds of smoke from their nostrils. Polo noted the cultural importance of dragons in Chinese society. He described how dragons were symbols of power and good fortune, and were often depicted in art and literature. While Polo's descriptions are fantastical, some historians and scholars believe that they may have been based on real animals, exaggerated through the lens of myth and legend. For example, the giant serpents could have been large pythons or other big snakes, and the dragon descriptions might have been embellished accounts of crocodiles or other reptiles. Valley of Darkness. Polo described a mysterious and perilous Valley of Darkness, which travelers had to cross. According to his account, this valley was so dark that it was impossible to see anything, and the journey through it was filled with unseen terrors and hazards. The Valley of Darkness has been interpreted in various ways by scholars and readers. Some see it as a metaphor for the challenges and unknowns that travelers of the Silk Road faced, while others view it as an embellishment typical of Polo's narrative style, blending the real and the imagined to captivate his audience. Prester John. Although not unique to Polo's writings, he mentioned the legend of Prester John, a wealthy and powerful Christian ruler of a vast kingdom somewhere in the East or Africa. This mythical king and his kingdom were subjects of widespread belief and speculation in medieval Europe. At first, Prester John was imagined to reside in India, tales of Church of the East, Christians' evangelistic success there, and of Thomas the Apostle's subcontinental travels, as documented in works like the Acts of Thomas, probably provided the first seeds of the legend. After the coming of the Mongols to the Western world, accounts placed the king in Central Asia, and eventually Portuguese explorers came to believe that the term was a reference to Ethiopia, by which time it had been an isolated Christian exclave, distant from any other Christian-ruled territory. Blemies. Similar to the Cynocephali, Polo also mentioned creatures known as blemies, beings without heads with their faces on their chests. These creatures were a part of ancient and medieval mythology and were believed to inhabit remote parts of the world. Various species of mythical headless men were rumored, in antiquity and later, to inhabit remote parts of the world. They are variously known as acephaloi or blemies, described as lacking a head, with their facial features on their chest. These were at first described as inhabitants of ancient Libya or the Nile system. Later traditions confined their habitat to a particular island in the Brisson River, or shifted it to India. Blemies are said to occur in two types, with eyes on the chest or with the eyes on the shoulders, monopods or sciapods. These were mythical creatures with a single large foot extending from a leg centered in the middle of their bodies. According to legend, they could use this gigantic foot to shade themselves from the sun. While Marco Polo did not specify the exact location of the monopods in his travels, such creatures were often placed in remote or exotic locations by medieval writers, typically in the far reaches of the known world, such as in parts of Africa or Asia. The concept of monopods was not unique to Marco Polo's writings. These beings were part of a broader medieval fascination with the exotic and the monstrous. They can be found in various ancient and medieval texts, and were often used to symbolize the unknown and the wonders found at the edges of the world. Modern interpretation suggests that Polo's and other medieval descriptions of monopods and similar mythical creatures were allegorical or symbolic, reflecting the curiosity and limited understanding of distant lands and peoples during that era. They might also have been inspired by encounters with unfamiliar animals or misinterpretations of travelers' tales. Marco Polo's accounts, filled with wondrous creatures and lands, have transcended time, inspiring generations with tales of the unknown and the unexplored. In these stories, the line between fact and fantasy blurs. They remind us of an era when the world map was still a canvas of possibilities, and the unknown fueled our greatest fantasies. Thanks for watching.